Hey guys, I'm Jeremy, and today I'll tell you about why I'm leaving China and what's next. I do tours in China, basically. So I've been doing this for almost 5 years now, and it's just been really tough. So I said, you know what? I'm finally going to go somewhere else and do tours in another country. So I've been thinking about either like Taiwan or Southeast Asia, the Balkans, the United States, like somewhere like Colorado, or even Mexico the last few days. So I'll tell you kind of how I went through the thought process and kind of how I'm coming to my conclusions now. I've been in China now for about 9 years, and before that I was 3 years in Taipei. And before that I lived in Nepal, Armenia, and I was doing a bicycle trip around the world. So I've been mostly gone for like 16 years outside of the US. There was a short time when I lived in the States for about 5 or 6 months in like 2009, and I worked 3 seasons in Alaska fishing. But other than that time, I've basically been out of the country. And so I'll tell you kind of, not necessarily why I'm leaving, because I've already made a bunch of videos on why I'm leaving China. You could check those out about how China's changed. So I finally came to the point about November last year, like I was gonna have to leave China because it's just gotten so hard to like get hotels and travel, and they don't treat foreigners quite as awesome as they used to. So I figured I need to move on. I've threatened to leave China a few times, but I actually didn't go. I mean, I was annoyed at certain things, but I generally didn't consider leaving for the most part. And so when I came back to China in 2013, I got to Chongqing, and I didn't really like it too much. And I had already biked Tibet and Yunnan province and a little bit of Gansu and Sichuan and stuff. And so I'd seen pretty areas, but I was like, I didn't really like the experience, so I was thinking of going. But that same year, I got a motorcycle, and that opened up so many doors because I didn't have to pedal everywhere where it takes a few weeks to do like one province. You could shoot out, you know, across the country basically and see some amazing things. So that opened up a lot of doors for me, and I think kept me interested in China a few years more in general. So I started doing tours in 2016, 2017 in Sichuan, basically, in some surrounding areas. I based myself out of Chengdu. And when the pandemic broke out, I was here, but then I went to Cambodia for a couple months. And when I came back, I was like one of the last foreigners to make it back, and I did 2 weeks quarantine in the hotel in Chengdu. And the school that I was working for told me like not to come back. They told us actually all not to come back. And I really didn't like the way they treated all of us. Like they told none of us to come back. And so everyone was stranded outside, and no one obviously could come back and get their stuff. And when I came back, they were acting like, you know, they're like, I need to check your temperature twice a day and all. They were just so paranoid, which was really annoying because in like January and February, you know, there was this big campaign around the world, like don't be xenophobic against Chinese about the virus and stuff. And there was that like, you know, famous Italian guy of Chinese descent made this video, and so all these Italians and stuff like hugged all the Chinese, and so there was this whole thing. So it was only March I came back, and they're like, oh my God, foreigners are the virus. They're like, tell me where you're going, like all the time, like in my moments, like we want to see everything you're doing. And I was like, I was so pissed off. I even told them, I was like, this wouldn't even be happening if you guys didn't like eat bats or whatever BS is going on, you know. So they were pissed obviously about that. They weren't going to rehire anyone anyway. They just got rid of that department, including me. I'm sure they would have gotten rid of me anyway. And so at that time, I was kind of looking at leaving. I applied to like a couple universities in Taiwan. I didn't get the job. I've done that a couple times over the years because I don't really mind teaching, but I usually like to do universities because you get some more free time, and it's a little bit just better teaching than just doing like a bushiban, like a kid's school, cram school at night where you're like working all the time and kind of stressed out. So I didn't get a job through them. And so I started kind of thinking about, you know, like either go back to the States or look other places. So I think at that time I started looking at like places in Europe or the United States or South America or whatever. And I figured at that time maybe I would just go back to the States, and I was thinking like Colorado would be amazing. My sister's out there and one of my best friends. And I talked to one of my buddies who has a roommate who's in the oil industry and working like 10 days on, 10 days off. And I was like, wow, that would be good because I can make some money and then on the time off develop the tour company. And so I applied like around, you know, April or so. And this was right around the time, of course, the United States, as 2020 was just nailed, like just overwhelmed with COVID. And the day I applied, I saw the news the next morning and it was like oil dropped to like -0 because there was a huge surplus and no one was buying anything. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to get that job. And then I realized that like, there was no reason to head back to the States at that time. Like it was already going to be chaos in a lot of countries, which of course was the case for most of 2020 and 2021. So I stayed put in China for the next 2 years. And things weren't too bad. I did a lot of tours. Of course, it was a big hassle to do some things like getting hotels and stuff. And so I finally had enough last November. I was like, fuck it. I just got to get out of here, and I didn't want to leave immediately, but I, started thinking about it. I was like, I've got to go and I've got to choose some decision. And so I consider the Taiwan thing, but to be quite honest, especially now that this Ukraine thing's happened, although it's not going great for Russia, it still puts in my mind the aspect like, I think China might take Taiwan back in the next few years or something. I don't want to develop a company, spend the next 5 years like I did mainland China, just to have mainland China invade Taiwan. And then I have all the same problems I had here. Like I might not be able to get a hotel. So, so that's not really an option. And of course I could go to like Southeast Asia and stuff. I know some good bike routes and hiking and stuff. I could develop my tour company there. But I'm like, I've been in Asia like, 13, 14 years or something like that. I'm like, why don't I try somewhere else? And I've always wanted to live in Europe. But of course, Europe's expensive. Like, obviously, like the Alps would be an amazing place to do tours. Super pretty, like the Dolomites or whatever in Italy and all these places in Switzerland and stuff. But it's super expensive. And of course, there's a lot of tour companies already there. So competition and price would be super high. So I was thinking about other places in Europe. And I was like, wow, the Balkans, are as cheap as China. And they're pretty friendly for like doing businesses and stuff like that. And there's also a lot of pretty things. You've got in Croatia, you have the Adriatic coast, which is where they filmed Game of Thrones and super beautiful. Down in Albania is super nice. And Montenegro, also along the coast and beautiful mountains. And Serbia looked good, and Bulgaria, all these places basically. And so I started looking into that. I guess first I looked into Croatia, which is a little more expensive and already has a lot of tour companies. So I considered looking at some other things. I actually talked to a girl from Croatia. She mentioned me consider Serbia. And so although Serbia is landlocked, it's not too far of a drive to like, Croatia and other places like Romania. And Belgrade was the capital of all Yugoslavia back in the day. So it is the biggest city in the region, which could be a little bit more fun and still get a lot of tourists through there. So I was even talking to my friend in Chengdu who's from Serbia. And I even arranged, I was like, can I mail stuff to your family? He lives, like an hour or so from Belgrade. And I was really getting stoked to, either there or maybe even down in Albania. Because for Americans, you could stay for a year without a visa in Albania. And it's supposed to be super pretty, nice coast and beautiful mountains. And the winter's not as harsh. You don't have a lot of the snow like you get in Belgrade and stuff like that. And also I thought of Belgrade because Zagreb, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it, the capital of Croatia didn't seem super interesting from what I read. Maybe it is cool, I don't know. And so, I figured I guess I could maybe try Belgrade, at least visit there, and then just rent a car and, go around through these countries and then just pick a spot basically. And so around November when I decided that I was going to leave China, there was a couple things that I needed to make work. Because of course I can't make a bunch of money teaching English in like Serbia or many countries, right? And that's mostly how I've been making money if the tours aren't going well. So of course, if I move to a new country, I'm not gonna have a ton of tours right away, right? And maybe even like in the summer, I'll have more. And then once in the winter, I'll have to have another strategy and stuff. So maybe I could teach online or something, but I need to find some remote work because I don't wanna work 40 hours a week teaching English for $5 an hour, right? And so I started hunting for remote jobs, okay? There's tons of information online and all these YouTubers are like, oh, you could do this and it's super easy and blah, blah, blah. And I know they're just exaggerating to try to get a bunch of clicks and stuff like that. But I actually thought it'd be a little easier than it's turned out because it's been about 6 months since I've been doing it. And it's not super easy to find good paying jobs. You'll find a lot of $5 or $10 things, but to find some good paying jobs isn't super easy yet. So that's one thing I needed to concentrate on. And then the other thing I needed was that when I started my tour company, I went under the umbrella of another company and they needed a deposit from me for about 14,000 US dollars as a deposit in case the insurance didn't cover it, like someone gets hurt or something like that. And so when I signed this contract And I also gave them, of course, like $3,000 for other services they could give, which I didn't really even use, basically. But at least I was technically more legal being underneath this company. And so she said when I signed the contract, of course, the main thing I asked was like, can I get the money back at any time, right? Because usually it's about 6 months or a year. Because I'm not surprised like they're going to invest some money or do something with it, which sucks, but that's reality. And so I started asking her last summer about the money, and she was kind of avoiding me a bit, and I knew that was a problem then. And so I ended that contract last summer with her, and she said she'd pay me after 6 months, which was January. And then once January came around, of course, she said, okay, now I'll pay you in June. And so right away then I was like, shit, if I don't have that money or a job, there's no way I'm just moving to Serbia or the Balkans, right? And so as time's going on, by like April, we're only 2 months from June, and I was like, Messenger, I'm like, are you gonna pay me in 2 months? Because I need to know. Like, I need to know what I'm doing with my life. I need to know if I can mail all my stuff to Serbia or am I going back to the States? And it didn't seem like she'd have the money. So, in the meantime, I got maybe a couple remote jobs that are like part-time, like teaching and stuff, but I was like, I want to make like $1,000 a month at least doing some remote jobs, whether teaching or whatever, and just a couple part-time jobs. And I was like, this isn't going to be enough to sustain me, and I'm not going to get tours right away. So if I'm not going to get that money back, because that money is almost enough where I could live for a year in Serbia and figure out like my next steps as a digital nomad or whatever. And so I could pretty much kiss that goodbye. And so the next thing I considered was just head back to the States, like Colorado's amazing. It's basically got similar scenery to like what I'm doing in Sichuan. When I go out to Western Sichuan, to these Tibetan areas, there's these amazing alpine lakes and stuff. And I want to be basically in that kind of environment. It's about 4,000 meters, about 12, 13, 14,000 feet. So Colorado is basically the same idea pretty much. And so I started researching more about Colorado, like the mountains and everything, and there's tons of beautiful things. I mean, there's some problems, like you need permits to get in some areas. It's starting to get really crowded in Colorado, all of Colorado. So, which is the first big problem, because obviously if there's a huge, demand and not enough supply, the housing market's super hard to get a place. And then the prices are going up because of the extra people and because of inflation now, because I'm making this video in May 2022. And right now the inflation's out of control. The job market's getting better, but I assume, of course, those are a lot of like, minimum wage or $20 an hour jobs. And I was still excited about looking forward to doing it. I mean, my sister's there, I could have a temporary place to live, and I still might try it out. And like, for instance, maybe I can get, like an oil job, like I said, work 10 days on, get 10 days off. I could make some money, and I could start to develop tours in those days off. And so what I did was I messaged like a Facebook group for like Colorado hiking and stuff. And I got a good reception. I said, hey guys, I'm an American, who's been doing tours in China for years, and I'm gonna come back and I'd love to do a tour company there. And if anyone wants to join me, come out, blah, blah, blah. And all the messages were great, but they also sent me some realistic things. Like some people are like, if you don't make like about $100,000 or like maybe 70, 80, 90, it's not gonna be that easy out here. And so that got me really thinking. I'm like, geez, even if I work as an oil job for 30 bucks an hour or some overtime, like I don't even know if I'd break even. So I don't mind doing like some dangerous job. Like I've gone out to Alaska 3 seasons and did salmon fishing and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, I've lost money doing that too. But I mean, the hope is that you're gonna make some good money at the end of the season, or after a year of working in like an oil field as a roughneck, I've got at least 10 or 20 in the bank. If I'm not gonna be able to save any money, it's not really worth losing fingers or blowing out like my knee or back or whatever, right? And so at that point I was like, shit, I mean, I don't even know if I could do Colorado. So I've also looked into Utah, which is cheaper and also has a lot of amazing things. You can still get to, Western Colorado pretty easily and go up to Wyoming and down to Arizona, etc. And so I'll look into that as well. But I'm sure still a lot of people are moving to Utah as well. Maybe not quite as bad as Denver area, but a lot of people are going there. And I'm like, shit, I don't even know if I want to afford this, or maybe I could go there part of the year, but I still want to live somewhere cheap. And so I was looking at New Mexico also, because you could probably get down, from northern New Mexico up to Denver, I don't know, maybe 6-7 hours or something like that. And New Mexico's got a lot of pretty areas, and it is one of the poorest states in the United States. So it'd be cheaper. And then I was thinking, I was like, what's cheaper than New Mexico? Mexico. And it's like another 5-6 hours down there. And I've never been to Mexico. I have been to Latin America. When I did my bike trip around the world, I did Chile, Argentina, the mountains there near Mendoza, and then I went over and took a bus over towards Uruguay and went up the coast up to Brazil, up to like around Florianopolis. And so it was cool, and it's also an area I considered Latin America in general, whether Patagonia or Central America or whatever. But I was kind of like, I've got to learn Spanish, obviously, which isn't as hard as Mandarin, at least. But I also figured like there's probably a million Mexican Americans or Latin Americans who live in the States or people who know Spanish that already have businesses throughout Latin America. So I was like, maybe it's like kind of oversaturated or whatever. Which is also why I considered the Balkans, because in the Balkans, everyone knows English pretty much. Of course I would learn some of the local language, but it wouldn't be a must. Like I wouldn't have to get as proficient where if I go to Mexico, like I've got to learn Spanish, at least intermediate. So, I'm not trying not to be lazy. I'm just not really great at languages. So that is a little bit of a barrier for me. I'm super well-rounded. Like I could do tours, I could make food, I could do tons of things. I'm great at organizing trips with dozens of people and parties and good social skills and stuff, but languages are a little tough. But, so that's fine though. I could obviously dig into that and do my best. And so, yeah, I've just been looking. So that's kind of the new thing the last few days. From what I understand, the northern part is pretty dry. I don't know if there's a lot of real nice places up in the north. It seems like maybe around Mexico City in the southeast is the best part. I'm still doing research. I know the highest mountain in the country, southeast of Mexico City, that's a volcano that's about almost like around 5,500 meters, which is huge. And because, you have to understand, one of the reasons why it was tough for me to even think of places to move to is that I do want to be around mountains that are like, let's say at least like 4,000 meters is kind of cool because you get these really pretty alpine lakes and stuff. And even in the Balkans, it's beautiful, but you wouldn't even have stuff like that you have in like Colorado or the Alps or the Tibetan areas. So that's kind of cool that Mexico has some higher mountains and it looked like a bunch of pretty waterfalls down there and stuff like that. Of course, I'm obviously concerned about like things like crime and stuff like that a bit more and some other issues, but it's like anywhere else, like I've biked through Syria, Pakistan, Iraq, Rwanda, Kenya, and the South American countries I mentioned. And, I've never had any issues pretty much, except for traffic. I've been hit by a car in China and in Kyrgyzstan, actually. So that's probably your biggest issue. So, yeah, so that's pretty much where I'm at right now. I'm looking at heading back in June in about 3 weeks here. I'm going to check out Colorado, going to Utah, New Mexico, Arizona area kind of for a bit. And I just hired a lawyer in the last couple of weeks to try to get this money back because obviously this lady's just never going to do it on her own, even though she said she will, right? She's just waiting till I leave and, ignore me basically. She has money, and I'm not surprised. I mean, her business was like 1.5 million renminbi invested into it. And even if she had bad business and lost like, a few 100,000 renminbi in a year, like I couldn't imagine losing more than that. Like she's got to have 1 million renminbi somewhere, and she said her dad's got cancer and stuff, even with bills and stuff, like it's not that expensive in China for healthcare and different things. Like she didn't lose all this money. She invested it in something and she's just waiting to flip the money, I'm sure. So hopefully this lawyer by fall could get me the money. Now, a lot of these times could take up to a year, so I'm not going to hold my breath for $1 or to get anything. But if I get that money in September or whatever, after I'm traveling in Colorado, Utah, New Mexico and stuff, I'm heading south. So I'm looking forward to it. Even if I don't live there, I'm definitely going to go down and check it out for a bit and look for a second place I could do tours in winter, because of course Colorado and a lot of these places in winter, I mean 4,000 meters, 12,000 feet, I mean it's all snow until even like late May. So it would be a good idea to have another base of like bike tours and hiking and everything. So yeah, it's kind of exciting actually. Either way, it'll be cool to check out Colorado and those other areas. And then my friend has property in Virginia. He's got basically a cabin and solar panels and some basic things there. I could live there for free and still get a hot shower and cook and make some money online, or even work in that town, like Floyd, Virginia. So some little ass town, but it might be better for me just to make a little money and live cheap through like winter, for instance, than trying to work 40, 50 hours a week in Colorado and not even breaking even, So we'll see what happens. It should be an interesting adventure. I might even go down to, Mexico and kind of live cheap like that. Live remotely, start to organize some tours and find some routes. And who knows, maybe in winter or next summer, I've got some tours. I have no idea, but it should be interesting nevertheless. And I'm looking forward to it. So the only issue there is that, I've been watching a few videos. They changed the residency rules. You used to be able to stay for, a year or whatever pretty easily. Maybe you only had to show you got like $1,000 a month or something. So I think you got to show you got like a couple $1,000 a month, some other things. So they made a lot of changes because obviously this whole COVID thing has changed the whole global migration patterns. Like people are leaving cities for the countryside. Certain people are leaving, let's say the West Coast for places like Denver, Salt Lake City. A bunch of other Americans are headed to Mexico and places because it's cheaper and they're working remotely. So it's everything's changing. So governments are, responding accordingly to all of these new changes and laws and stuff like that. So, but at least I should be able to get like, a few months visit. I know usually they give you 6 months. They might change that. Even if I had 90 days, I could see quite a bit. So that could be a pretty cool trip this summer. So I'm looking forward to not just seeing it, but share some cool videos with you guys. So anyway, like and subscribe, follow me if you want to see some cool tours in the next few months. I've got 2 or 3 trips in China, and then I'll be in LA and then Western New York. And then, I'm going to check out Colorado and Utah and have a bunch of cool videos. New Mexico, and with any luck, I'm cruising into Mexico in a few months from now. If not, I'll be doing some off-the-grid living in Virginia. So it should be an interesting year regardless. So I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Cheers.